Love is a need, a craving, a drive to seek life's greatest prize. Helen Fisher, biological anthropologist. We have found the one you waited for all your life. So why doesn't the honeymoon last forever? In which we explore the la- chemical that you want sex and fall in love, and why sooner or later everything changes. Sean whipped a clear space on Sean waved a clear space on his streamed over bathroom mirror, ran his finger through his black hair, smiled. This will work, he said. He dropped his towel and admired his flat belly. His obsession with the gym has produced two-thirds of a six pack. From that, his mind went to a more pressing obsession. He had not been out with anyone since February, which was a nice way of saying he hadn't had sex in 7 months and 3 days. And he was disturbed to realize he had kept track too precisely. That streak ends tonight, he thought. At the bar, he surveyed the possibilities. There were a lot of attractive women here tonight. Not that were everything. He missed sex, sure, but he also missed having someone in his life, someone to text for no reason, someone who could be a welcome part of every day. He considered himself a romantic even if tonight was just about sex. He kept He kept meeting eyes of a young woman standing with a chatty friend at a high top table. She had dark she had dark hair and brown eyes, and he noticed her because she wasn't in the usual Saturday night uniform. She had on flats instead of heels, and she wore lace instead of club clothes. He introduced himself, and the conversation came quickly and easily. Her name was Samantha. And the first thing he said was that she was more comfortable doing cardio than putting back beers. That led to an in depth discussion of local gyms, fitness apps, and the relative merits of working out in the morning versus the afternoon. For the rest of the night, he didn't leave her side, and she quickly came to like having him there. Lots of factors pushed them along to what would become a long term relationship. Their common interest, the ease they felt with each other, even the drinks, and a little desperation. But none of that was the real key to love. The big factor was this: they were both under the influence of a mind altering chemical. So was everyone else in the bar, and it turns out so are you. What is more powerful than pleasure? Dopamine was discovered in the brain in 1957 by Kathleen Montagu, a researcher, a researcher working in a laboratory at the Runwell Hospital near London. Initially, dopamine was seen simply as a way for the body to produce a chemical called no, norepinephrine. Norepinephrine, which is what adrenaline is called when it is which is what adrenaline is called when it is found in the brain. But then scientists began to observe strange things. Only 0.0005% of brain cells produce dopamine, 1 in 2 million. Yet these cells appear to exert an outsized influence on behavior. Research participants experienced feelings of pleasure when they turned dopamine on and went to great lengths to trigger the activation of these rare cells. In fact, under the right circumstances, pursuit of feel good dopamine activation became impossible or resist. Some scientists dopamine the pleasure cherished dopamine the pleasure molecule and the pathway that dopamine producing cells take through the brain was named the reward circuit. The reputation of dopamine as the pleasure molecule was further cemented through experiment with drug addicts. These researchers injected them with a combination of cocaine and radioactive sugar, which allowed the scientists to figure out which parts of their brains were burning the most calories. As the intravenous cocaine took effect, participants were asked to rate how high they felt. Researchers discovered that the greater the activity in the dopamine reward pathway, the greater the high. As the body cleared the cocaine from the brain, dopamine activity decreased and the high faded. Additional studies produced similar results. The role of dopamine as the pleasure molecule was established. Other researchers tried to duplicate the results, and that's when unexpected things begin to happen. The reason that it's unlikely that dopamine pathways involved to encourage people to get high on drugs. Drugs were probably causing an artificial form of dopamine stimulation. It seemed more likely that the elu- evolutionary processes that harnessed dopamine were driven by the need to motivate survival and reproductive activities. So they replaced cocaine with food, expecting to see the same effect. What they found surprised everyone. It was the beginning of the end for the dopamine as a pleasure molecule. Dopamine that discovered isn't about pleasure at all. Dopamine delivers a feeling much more influential. Understanding dopamine turns out to be the key to exploring and even predicting behavior across a spectacular range of human endeavors. Creating art, literature, and music, seeking success, discovering new worlds and new laws of nature, thinking about God and falling in love. Sean knew he was in love. His insecurities melted away. Every day made him feel on the brink of a golden future as he spent more time with Samantha. His excitement about her grew and his sense of anticipation became constant. Every thought of her suggested limitless possibilities. As for Zack, his libido was stronger than ever, but only for her. Other women ceased to exist. Even better, when he tried to confess all this happiness to Samantha, she interrupted him to say she felt exactly the same. Sean wanted to be sure they would be together forever, so one day he proposed to her. She said yes. A few months after their honeymoon, things began to change. At the start, They had been obsessed with one another, but with the passage of time, that desperate longing became less desperate. They believed that anything was possible became less certain, less obsessive, less at the center of everything. Their elation receded. They weren't unhappy, but the profound satisfaction from their earlier time together was slipping away. A sense of limitless possibilities began to seem unrealistic. Thoughts about each other that used to come constantly didn't. Other women began to draw Sean's attention, not that he intended to cheat. Samantha let herself flirt sometimes too, even if it was no more than a shared smile with the college boy begging groceries in the checkout line. They were happy together, but the early glows of their new life began to feel like their old life apart. The magic, whatever it was fading, just like my last relationship, thought Samantha. Been there, done that, thought Sean. Monkeys and rats are, and they love fades. Why they love fades? In some ways, rats are easier to study than human beings. Scientists can do a lot more to them without having to worry about the research ethics board knocking at their door to test the hypothesis that both food and drugs simulate dopamine. The scientists implanted electrodes directly into rats' brains so they could directly measure the activity of individual dopamine neurons. Next, they built cages with cuts for food pellets. The results were just as they expected. As soon as they dropped the first pellet, the rat's dopamine system lit up. Success natural rewards stimulate dopamine activity just as well as a cocaine and other drugs. Next, they did something the original experiments had not. They kept going, monitoring the rat's brain as pellets of food were dropped down the tube day after day. The results were wholly unexpected. The rats devoured the food as enthusiastically as ever. They were obviously enjoying it, but their dopamine activity shut down. Why would dopamine stop firing when stimulation keeps coming? The answer came from an unlikely source, a monkey and a light bulb. Wolfram, Wolfram is among the most influential pioneers of dopamine experimentation. As a professor of neurophysiology at the
down the chute day after day. The results were wholly unexpected. From an unlikely source, a monkey and a light bulb. Wolfram Schultz is among the most influential.
Wolfram Schultz is among the most influential pioneers of dopamine experimentation. As a professor of neurophysiology physiology at the University of Freiburg, Switzerland. He became interested in the role of dopamine in learning. He implanted tiny electrodes into the brains of macaque monkeys, macaque monkeys, where dopamine cells clustered together. He then placed the monkeys in an apparatus that had two lights and two boxes. Everyone, once in a while, one of the lights turned on. One light was a signal that the food pellet, the dopamine cells in their brain fired just as in the rats. After a while, the monkeys figured out the signals and the reached reached for the correct food containing box every time, and at that the time of the dopamine release began to change from firing at the discovery of the food to firing at the light. Seeing the light go on would always be unexpected, but once the monkeys figured out that the light meant they were about to get food, the surprise they felt came exclusively from the appearance of the light, not from the food. From that, a new hypothesis arose. Dopamine activity is not a maker of pleasure, it is a reaction to the unexpected, to possibility and anticipation. As beings, as human beings, we get a dopamine rush from similar promising surprises. The arrival of a sweet note from your lover. What will it say? An email message from a friend you haven't seen in years. What's the news going to be? Or if you are looking for romance, meeting a fascinating new partner at a sticky table in the same old bar, what might happen? But when these things become regular, and thus to look to the future, where every exciting possibility begins. But when anything, including love, becomes familiar, that excitement slips away and new things draw our attention. The scientist who studied this phenomenon named the buzz we get from novelty reward prediction error. And it means just what the name says. We constantly make predictions about what's coming next, from what time we can leave work to how much money we expect to find when we check our balance at the ATM. When what happens is better than what we expect, it is literally an error in our forecast of the future. Maybe we get to leave work early, or we find $100 more in checking than we expected. That happy error is that what launches dopamine into actions. It's not the extra time or extra money themselves, it's the thrill of the unexpected good news. In fact, the mere possibility of a reward prediction errors is enough for dopamine to swing into action. Imagine you are walking to work on a familiar street, one you have traveled many times before. All of a sudden, you notice that a new bakery has opened, one you have never seen. You immediately want to go in and see what they have. That's dopamine taking charge, and it produces a feeling different from enjoying how something tastes, feels, or looks. It's the pleasure of anticipation, the possibility of something unfamiliar and better. You are excited about the bakery, yet you haven't eaten any of their pastries, sampled any of their coffee, or even seen how it looks inside. You go in and order a cup of dark roast and croissant. You take a sip of the coffee, the complex flavors play across your tongue. It's the best you have ever had. Next, you take a bite of the croissant. It's buttery and flaky, exactly like the one you had years ago at a cafe in Paris. Now, how do you feel? Maybe that your life is a little better with this new way to start your day. From now on, you are going to come here every morning for breakfast and have the best coffee and flakiest in this Khoisan city. You will tell your friends about it, probably more than they care to hear. You will buy a mug with the cafe's name on it. You will even be more excited to start the day because, well, this awesome cafe, that's why. That's dopamine in action. It's as if you have fallen in love with the cafe. Yet sometimes when we get the things we want, it's not as pleasant as we expect. Dop- Dopaminergic excitement, that is the thrill of anticipation, doesn't last forever because eventually the becomes the present. The thrilling mystery of the unknown becomes the boring familiarity of the everyday, at which point dopamine's job is done and the letdown sets in. The coffee of croissant were so good. You made that bakery your regular breakfast stop. But after a few weeks, the best coffee and croissant in the city became the same old breakfast. But it wasn't the coffee and croissant that changed. It was your expectations. In the same way, Samantha and Sean were obsessed with each other until their relationship became utterly familiar. When things become part of the daily routine, there is no more reward prediction error, and dopamine is no longer triggered to give you those feelings of excitement. Sean and Samantha surprised each other in a sea of anonymous faces at a bar, then obsessed over each other until the imagined future of never ending delight became the concrete experience of reality. Dopamine's job, the ability to idealize the unknown, came to the end, so dopamine shut down. Passion rises when we dream of world of possibility and fades when we are confronted by reality. When the god or goddess of love beckoning you to the border became a sleepy spouse blowing his or her nose into a ratty Kleenex. The nature of love, the reason to stay, must change from da- dopaminergic, dopaminergic dreams to something else. But what? One brain, two worlds. John.